It was supposed to be a quiet evening in Maplewood, Kentucky, a small rural town where the fields rolled wide and the forests whispered with secrets. But hidden behind one weathered wooden fence was a silence too heavy to be natural, a silence born not of peace but of cruelty. A silence that would soon be broken by a cry in the forest, a cry that would change everything. For Samuel Dillard, honor was everything, or at least that was what he told himself. He was the son of a preacher who believed that mistakes were sins to be punished, not lessons to be forgiven. In Maplewood, people respected Samuel, but never out of love. They feared him. His face was lined with years of hardness, his voice low but sharp, his eyes the kind that could freeze a person in place. So when his quiet 20-year-old daughter, Ruth, was discovered to be pregnant and unmarried, Samuel's pride cracked. And when she gave birth to twins, right there on the kitchen floor with no help and no blessing, his pride turned to something darker. He didn't care who the father was, didn't want to know, didn't listen to Ruth's tears or her whispered pleas. To him, those children weren't grandchildren. They were shame given form. That night, without warning, Samuel shoved his daughter and the newborns into the back of his pickup truck. He drove deep into the Kentucky woods, down paths only hunters dared to take. Under a tall oak tree, Samuel tied Ruth's hands with thick rope and left her there, the twins strapped to her chest. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He only said one sentence before walking away. "This disgrace ends here." Then he drove off, the growl of the engine fading into the night. Hours passed. The crickets sang. The owls called, but Ruth's world was filled only with the whimpers of her newborns. Her arms ached from being tied, her body still bleeding from childbirth, and her lips cracked with thirst. She tried to hum an old hymn her mother once sang to her, hoping her voice might calm the babies, or maybe herself. But each note was weak, broken, carried away by the trees. And yet the forest heard, because not every sound disappears in the woods. Sometimes, when cruelty tries to bury the truth, fate sends someone listening. That someone was Eli Turner, a 22-year-old farmhand gathering firewood for his grandmother. Eli had known sorrow too. His own mother had died when he was young, cast out of her home by a family that chose pride over compassion. Raised by his grandmother, Eli had learned to pay attention to the smallest things, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, the difference between a bird's chirp and a cry of pain. And that evening, Eli heard something that made him stop in his tracks. A sound that didn't belong to the forest. Weak, muffled, human. He followed it, pushing through the branches until his heart nearly froze. There, beneath the great oak tree, was a sight that seared into his soul. A pale, exhausted young woman tied to the trunk, ants crawling across her arms, her lips trembling, and two tiny newborns pressed to her chest, their cries fading into whimpers. Eli dropped his axe. He rushed forward, his voice steady but gentle. "Stay with me. I'm here." He cut the ropes, wrapped his shirt around the babies, and lifted Ruth into his arms. She was barely conscious, but her eyes, clouded with pain, flickered with a fragile hope. The walk back to town was long. Eli carried both babies against his chest, pausing to let Ruth drink from his canteen, whispering, "Just a little further. They need you. Don't give up now." When they reached the center of Maplewood, the town square fell silent. Children stopped playing, shopkeepers froze, and women holding baskets of bread stared in disbelief. They had all seen Ruth's belly grow, heard her cries in the night, but none had dared to speak up. And now, standing before them, Eli carried the truth for everyone to see. Ruth, weak but alive, and her two fragile babies. An older woman, Clara May, the midwife who had once been turned away by Samuel, stepped forward, took the twins in her arms, and said firmly, "These children live. And so does she. But shame belongs not to her. It belongs to us, for looking away." Whispers spread through the crowd. Some lowered their heads in guilt. Others glanced towards Samuel's house. And that day, for the first time, the town understood that silence could be just as cruel as action. Word reached Samuel quickly, but instead of facing the truth, he locked his gate and stayed inside. For years, he had ruled his family with fear. Now, fear had turned back on him. His wife eventually left, his neighbors stopped visiting, and the man who once commanded respect became a ghost in his own home. He died years later, alone, remembered not as honorable but as a warning. Meanwhile, Ruth chose never to return. She made a new home in the midwife's cottage, sewing clothes for her twins, slowly rebuilding her strength. She never taught her sons to hate their grandfather. Instead, she taught them courage, the courage to choose kindness where cruelty once reigned. And Eli? He never demanded thanks, never sought glory. He came quietly, bringing food, repairing fences, rocking the twins when Ruth was too weak. He told her one evening, under the glow of lantern light. "I didn't save you to make you owe me. I saved you because no one deserves to be left behind in the dark." The twins grew strong, their laughter filling the air where silence once ruled. And in Maplewood, people began to tell their story not as gossip, but as a lesson. That honor without compassion is nothing but tyranny. That silence in the face of cruelty is as deadly as cruelty itself. And that sometimes the greatest courage comes not from power or age, but from a single heart willing to listen to a cry no one else will hear. And so, the forest that once held despair became the place where hope was reborn.